It's all about like democratization of something that like only a certain set of people were doing, now getting expanded to a larger thing. Everybody is a content creator of some sort. You're trying to put a blog post, you're trying to put a social media, you're trying more and more to be that designer that used to be a creative department. So I think that democratization is what is driving a lot of the innovation now. And we are trying to work towards enabling that democratization.
Welcome to LaunchPod, the show from LogRocket where we sit down with top product and digital leaders. Today, we're talking with Kamal Srinivasan, SVP of Product Development at Alludo. In this episode, we discuss how CorelDraw was modernized from a legacy desktop app into an AI-enabled collaborative SaaS product, including the user research approach that balanced less mature users with the needs of longtime power users, and how they utilized AI to power entire workflows, helping all users behave like pros. We also discuss Kamal's navigation of a major roadmap dispute with senior leadership, including the real negotiation tactics he used to diffuse the initial conflict, and his squiggly line framework for balancing near-term revenue with long-term product vision. So here's our episode with Kamal Srinivasan. Hey, Kamal, what's up, man? It's good to see you again. I know we caught up in person in Seattle when I was there last week, but good to see you digitally now this time.
Same here, Jeff. It was a fun dinner, and thanks for organizing that. If any of your listeners get an opportunity, definitely don't visit. A good set of folks, function across industry folks that you get to meet at one of these Jeff's dinners.
Yeah, it had a blast. Good news is we're going to do more of them too. I think we did like 8 over the past, 6 months or so, but we're going to start doing a lot more. We're going to be hitting all sorts of cities. So hopefully get to meet some listeners or meet some people who become listeners afterwards, or just get to learn about some cool product stuff. But it was cool getting to meet you, but we've got a cool show here to talk about. You got a cool background. You started out PhD in computer engineering, moved into product over time, and then you've spent quite a bit of time across multiple companies, Microsoft, Oracle, in my backyard, EMC back in Hopkinton, where I grew up.
Yep.
And now you're at Alludo, and there's been some really neat work you've done, kind of taking some of these products that have been around for quite a while. And how do you bring them into the modern age? How do you ensure that they remain competitive for as long as they've been around, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Maybe you can just give us the quick and dirty, though. How do you go from computer engineering PhD to leading product at a company like this?
Yeah. Look, I mean, although it looks like PhD to a product management.
Straight line, right?
A lot of, yeah, it looks like quite a leap and maybe a lot of squiggly lines. But I'll tell you, one of my biggest learnings, there's an aspect you do in PhD, which is structured curiosity. And you're kind of comfortable with the ambiguity. Guess where that is the case?
I've heard product can be a little ambiguous. So
if you think about PhD, you're trying to define the problem for years. You're trying to figure out, hey, where are the real set of issues and problems to go focus? If you think about hypothesis testing, that's exactly what you do, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about failures and quick experiment and just fail fast loop, that's what you do. I can't remember the number of times I've been rejected with papers, ideas. My advisor has not been happy with experiment we did, or the results were not it was, right? So you kind of learn this in the training over many years. I only wish more PhDs showed up in product management, because there is actually a lot of interesting aspects of how to, especially in today's world of this AI and this infrastructure and systems. You need to be technical, and you need to be able to go deeper and deeper into data, and you need to be able to understand all these signal to noise ratio, right? And identifying the signals. So there's a good set of things. So it's really helped me, if anything.
That is the single best explanation I've heard for why a PhD is great hands-on training for being a product manager that I think I've ever heard. I don't know why more PhDs aren't in product with that, right? Because it really is. You have to find a novel discovery or novel problem, and a lot of that is finding it. So much of schooling, as much as I loved school, but so much of it is, here's the problem to solve, go solve it, right? Or here is how you need to learn this process. But this is just purely go discover something that's not been discovered before, write it up, and then defend it.
That's another aspect we didn't speak. Yeah. Getting stakeholder buy-in, you kind of learn in your PhD from day one, because, hey, first you're convincing your advisor, your peers, and then some form of committee. There's a lot of goodness. It's all goodness.
I love that. I always kind of wondered about PhD because it seems like you go so deep, but I guess if you look at it from the broader metaphor of school, right? A lot of schooling is just teaching you how to think, or, a lot of the degree I got, I don't really use it day to day, but I do think I learned the thinking processes and thinking skills
Correct.
and critical thinking and stuff like that. It's the same thing, just next level up, go discover something definitive. So that's sweet. We've already broke new ground here and we're only a
Awesome.
couple of minutes in. But no, the thing I really want to talk about, and I guess I would wager that training probably played well into this, is while you spent time at kind of, a lot of companies that were really innovating, Microsoft with Azure at the time you were there, and, that level of kind of newness, you now came in to Alludo. You guys have a product, CorelDraw, and it has been around for quite a while. Maybe give a brief overview of what it is, but also beyond that, like, what was the challenge it was facing, and what were we kind of walking into here that had to maybe change face of it?
Definitely. I think like I'll first tell about CorelDraw.
Yeah.
CorelDraw, at the simplest heart of it, it's a vector design software, right? It's a graphic design software that is like can do vector as an output. So,
Mhm.
which means that like you can edit like points. Imagine you draw a circle and you can have infinite number of points on it and you can edit each point, which means the
Yeah.
shape of that particular circle is not necessarily a circle. So it's very useful for if you think about graphics design, right? You try to make a card, you try to make a t-shirt, right? Like you can now edit things on that t-shirt. So you don't have to have a static image and just be able to apply artifact removal to it, right? Like remove background or change somebody. But instead, you can change every aspect of that pixel within that image, which is very, very powerful if you think about like
Mhm.
professional designers. The canonical names you might have heard in the space is Adobe, right? Who's the other
Yep.
competitor of
Think I've heard of
CorelDRAW.
them.
Yeah, like a small company. So Adobe is another kind of like a vector. Adobe Illustrator specifically provides this kind of capability, right? And it's been there for quite some time because if you think about like printing, right? You go to your favorite store, you want to do some graphics design, you can do it. Posters, right? That like you see signboards, which is a very common thing. Even labels you get printed on your items, right? How do they
Yep.
do it? It's through these kind of vector design software. That's what like CorelDRAW is. And look, became much more powerful. So it is a very innovative thing in 80s, late 80s. And then it slowly went into the 90s, but really creating the kind of, with the growth of what personal devices were, the desktop software provided
Mhm.
that. So traditionally, it's been a very desktop oriented thing. And guess what has happened over the last 10, 15 years, right? Things have moved on beyond just your personal computer to things in the cloud and the workflows not sitting just on one place, but the workflows are distributed and whatnot. So therein lies the challenge as to how do you take something that is still a very useful product, there are millions of users and millions more that are coming into the trial workflow, right, as new users. How do you take all this pipeline, all this data, all these users, respect where your current set of users are and yet transform for these new set of users who are probably trying to do something else, right?
Mhm.
But the output and the creation is at the end of the day, they're trying to get to same kind of t-shirt design in a new workflow, or a mug design in a new workflow, or print a label in a new workflow, right? So that was a challenge and our opportunity that we were going after.
I can identify that pretty well too, because before I had a respectable job in tech, I worked in the music industry and worked at record labels and, was
Oh
in
yeah.
bands and everything. Yeah, yeah. I had a much more rebellious side to me before I was in the, laced up world of startup technology.
You still look rebellious, Jared.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. But I remember sitting there and like we would design buttons for bands, or there's one band I know that's still very famous and making a comeback right now that I'm very happy to say I think I made the button design and about 100,000 buttons for them. But it was always if we wanted to tweak something or any kind of edit, it was like I had my computer and then I could save the file. And
Yep.
as I progressed in my career, I could email it to them maybe, or I would have to, going back further, take a flash drive and move it over, something like that. But this idea of collaboration, which seems central now, just didn't exist. And I'm sure that's just one piece of like all these changes that have gone on in the world of this kind of vector-based design.
And there is an aspect, an important aspect you just said there, right? Which is the nuance, which is you were the only one designing that button and you were the only
Sadly.
one going and print. In a good way, you could say it, right? Like, but
Yeah.
like you designed it and you took it to somewhere, you printed it, and then like brought it back, right? Versus like the general trend of like what's happening across the board. This is not
Yeah.
just the case for vector graphics or design
Right.
software. Is there is collaboration, which is all about democratization, right? That's another way of saying whether in what's tip of the tongue for everybody, which is vibe coding. It's all about like democratization of something that like only a certain set of people were doing, now getting expanded to a larger thing. Because if you can, in terms of graphics design, right, everybody is trying to design something, including kids trying to do posters these days for
Yeah.
their school, all the way to marketing teams or content creators. Everybody's a content creator of some sort. You're trying to put a blog post, you're trying to put a social media, you're trying more and more to be that designer that used to be a creative department within your like company, or like you relied on somebody, right? So I think that democratization is what is driving a lot of the innovation now. And like we are trying to work towards enabling that democratization of that vector design software.
So I guess taking a step back, you're trying to democratize it. What did that mean, or what does that look like as applied to CorelDraw? Because you talked about, right,
Yeah.
it's a bit of collaboration, it's a bit of democratization, but I think there's more to it than just that, right? It's more than just having a couple people in the file versus having little old me designing a button end to end. There's a world of kind of generative AI that has really popped up. There is a lot of things people think these things should be able to do now. Where do you start with a tool
Yeah.
like CorelDRAW? Like, how do you start that process, and how does that kind of output something that, I mean, I saw the launch, I saw the results. It seems like it got really good traction and really good feedback. So it seems like the end result turned out well. So I'd love to kind of hear, how did you get there? How can other people learn to kind of, maybe not the folks at like Adobe or something, but everyone else, how can they learn to follow
Yeah.
on like that?
No, thank you. Thank you for that acknowledgement there. Great work by the team, and like it's a
Yeah.
collaborative effort, right? Lots of goodness that happened for many years to get to the point where we are. Look, I mean, like it was not a question of if we should do it, or it's not a question of like what, right? Because the what is a long laundry list of things we
Yeah.
already recognized, but it's actually how you go about it, right? And what are some of the things that like biggest aspect of a legacy product like a CorelDRAW that like you need to modernize is, as one of the things I mentioned there was respecting your users. There's a professional
Mhm.
design community that are like it's got an established active user base, right? Like they want the active usage is pretty high, and like it's a daily workflow. How do you respect innovation for them while kind of creating this new user base that has a different kind of a workflow and a methodology to it, right? And I think like this is where like one of the things that like I like to think of is like a framework, which is how do you discover, how do you define, how do you develop and deliver something? You may call it like 4Ds or like some way to simplify it and remember, right? So discovery is like all of us try to do different tools, right? Like from surveys to user testing to like how do you look at the data amplitude and understand, hey, where things are? How do you look at like secondary place, right? Like and look at how the users are behaving. A lot of the user intent is understanding that, right? And we did a lot of things which understood some of the user intent and kind of bifurcated how to look at users who are professional designers, and then like what are these new users, and the new user may not be a professional designer, right? That was our biggest learning. Once we understood that, then we could drill into the second and third degree orders of magnitude, which was like, okay, hey, how do you define the product or theses for those different sets of users, right? This professional designer needed something, right? Like, which is like, as an example, like a format of web piece support, which stood out very well in from an ideas portal that we had. And then like we were able to deliver that, right? In a quick iteration versus these new and beginner users who were coming in was all about this democratization that I was talking about. They had
Mhm.
never seen CorelDRAW, right? So to throw something like a software that is super rich to them would be detrimental, right? This is
Yeah.
where a lot of the user intent we were capturing was seeing where the hotspots were, where the trial drops were, Sometimes they would not even get into the funnel, right, of the trial. And sometimes it would be a churn at the very end of it. But figuring out like, hey, where those pain points were was almost like most of the work we were doing.
Mhm.
Once we had like an hypothesis on what was not one hypothesis, I would say two to three that like we initially wanted to do, we turned around and said like, hey, here is a new service that we're going to deliver for these beginner intermediate users because think about this collaborative kind of a workflow that they want to do. How do you get them to a service oriented thing that can work across any device, work from their browser? They can close this, open it in their iPad in the evening, and they can still go edit something, right? And finish the workflow. So that is the kind of thing that like we ended up delivering at the end of the day. And that's what CorelDraw Go was, which was a lightweight vector graphics design, which was fundamentally seeing that like this beginner and intermediate users that are coming into the funnel can get to productivity in minutes, not days or weeks, than it typically takes somebody with a professional graphics design typically did, right? So, which means they are able to get to tens of such designs in quick time period over like a day.
So I think you briefly touched on this idea of the ideas portal. Is that kind of what it sounds like? I assume it's kind of a place where a user can come in, interact, give you suggestions, give you ideas, if you will. Was there any worry within that kind of like what you would get there would be heavily weighted towards your kind of long time power users, or were you able to kind of discern who was, kind of those new users who were non-design background that you talked about versus the heavier,
Yeah.
maybe long-time power users? Like, how'd you kind of split
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
personas to ensure you were
That's a
building
that's
for
a
both?
very good question, right? Look, Ideas Portal cannot be absolutely what you said is true, which is like at the end of the day, these different mechanisms are different ways data can be skewed in how
Mhm.
you view, right, at the lens. Ideas Portal is definitely skewed towards our existing professional designers who
Mhm.
knew about this product and who were already users of the product, and they're coming in and giving you feedback, right? I cannot take that feedback and apply it to what I want to do with my beginner intermediate audience because, like, look, they first of all, they're new users. They don't have time to go into an ideas portal and submit feedback and then like upload a feedback. This is too much for them, right? So you got to capture intent. The other way to answer your question is you got to capture intent across a variety of sources at different places. And then it's your job as a product person to kind of combine all that and look at how you're going to take that feedback, right, from that
Mhm.
spectrum. Because we didn't use Ideas Portal for that beginner intermediate audience, just put it
Makes
plainly,
sense.
right? We
Yeah.
used more like, hey, where are the hotspots in their workflow where they dropped off, right? Because we had some activation metrics. Did they reach that activation point? And how long it took them to reach that activation point? Did they do it on first day? Did they repeat it? Like a bunch of other user intents that we were capturing, which we used as a proxy to understand like how they were really adopting the hypothesis we had or rejecting it, right?
Yeah.
And then we refined from there, right? I wouldn't say we have cracking this means that like we're wildly successful from revenue. At the end of the day, that's the one metric that like matters at a company, right?
It's the one metric to
uh
rule them all, right?
that rules them all. So look, it's a iterative process to get there, and like we're trying to get there as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I really appreciate how you're kind of looking at it in you have this kind of deep community driven approach to how do you serve your power users and the long term ones, but still at the same time, how do you approach this new cohort of users almost from a more 0 to 1 fashion? Where are they getting stuck in onboarding? Where are they just having trouble with key workflows? It's not about how do we take this product from 90 to 100. It's how do we get them in? How do we get them using it? And how do we let them do the core things they're trying to do, because that is going to be more basic. They're not professional designers who are
Yep.
in this thing 8, 10 hours a day. This is something, like you said, they're trying to get like 10 iterations out real quickly. Maybe they're trying to collaborate with a designer. It's a different workflow. So I appreciate the kind of way you're looking at that. And I'll be honest now, I would be remiss if in any major launch that went on in the past any bit of time, I didn't talk about AI and just I mean, that was the point,
I
right? I think
knew.
I think we spent like
Yeah.
45%, we spent like 45 minutes out of like an hour and a half chat at least at dinner about AI as a whole group, but not like the high-minded, yeah, it's gonna change the world, blah, blah. We know that. So, to leverage a concept that Aji brought up, our speaker up at Seattle when we met, kind of these ideas of AI at the edge versus AI in the core. How did you look to bring in like functional aspects
Yeah.
where artificial intelligence was really going to help both cohorts and the users do better?
Correct. Look, again, just like it's not what we need to do, it's not like if we need to do, right? Like that's your point, which is like, hey,
Yeah.
how you go about it and how do you really influence real productivity? Because at the end of the day, when you think about AI and a vector graphics design software, it's a productivity software.
Mhm.
So if the productivity as a singular metric is not changing drastically, then this AI is a novelty, not necessarily
Right.
something that is going to add value for the user, right? At some point, then they'll attrition out of that feature or the product or like that entire pricing capability, right? So that's
Yeah.
how I think about it. So when we
Mhm.
think about AI, like within CorelDraw specifically, there's an aspect of capability, right? When I say capability, for example, CorelDraw, we've done some AI capabilities like power trace. Oh, you're tracing something, there's an image, you mark it, and it can automatically translate that into a outline. So now you've got an outline onto your image, and now you can edit it, right? So you didn't have to trace it, so it
Yeah.
automatically traced that outline, whatever complex the outline is, right? So that's super powerful capability. Artifact removal, right? You see that in any of the photo apps, right? So artifact
Yeah.
removal is a big thing. We enable artifact removal. We enable like sketch, right? So let's say you draw an outline, we can turn it into a bitmap vector kind of a outline to a important thing that you're drawing. So capturing that intent. So
Mhm.
capabilities are one thing, but really where we see is that like capability had to manifest in a UI design that the
Mhm.
user can really use in their workflow, right? Which kind of leads to my second part, which is like if you think about AI, it's not just a singular thing, right? If you think about productivity, there's a workflow. I start my day as a graphics designer and I end my day. Between that, I'm doing a bunch of things, right, to get to my output. And how do I get into that workflow and seamlessly integrate AI so that like I'm getting from that start to the end that they're
Mhm.
able to do faster than what they were able to do before, which
Yeah.
means I'm spitting out, let's say, hundreds or tens of output versus maybe single digit number as before, right? A simple example is imagine like I'm a person in a marketing team. I'm responsible for designing. There's a conference. I'm responsible for designing some gear and other stuff, right? If I can enable that person to not think about this as an AI or a thing, but instead say that like, hey, I need to do this. I'm capturing that intent and giving them an output which they're able to automatically integrate and say that like, hey, print this, put it on a card, ship these things, right? All the
Yeah.
stuff. Now that workflow is what we are trying to get towards. Where
Yeah.
we are is more on the capability side. So we fundamentally built a bunch of capabilities. And now we are trying to understand how do I influence the workflows so that like I'm capturing the intent there.
Yeah. I think it makes sense, right? Like, let's first, I think we talked about again at dinner. Step one is just start doing things with it, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but figure out. And I mean more on the user end than on the production level feature end,
Yeah.
but just start seeing what resonates, what works, and then move on to maybe, like you said, kind of capabilities. Let's start making people's lives a little bit easier. Let's start, helping the tools be a little bit more efficient. And then the next step is let's really start to blur the line between AI and solution. And, I think we have an idea here to parallel it to LogRocket because that's just the one I know better. We do session replay, but where we started was building ML models and then AI models that will proactively tell you important moments or important issues within user sessions. So you don't have to wait for, conversion rate to drop, or you don't have to wait to start losing money on your, checkout pathway. Let's say if you're an e-com tool, we can just proactively see it happening and raise a flag for you. That was step one. But step two is starting to really monitor for what are the questions we know they're going to get asked if we just get ahead of that, right? So as you maybe start to release new features, or as you do a release, we can, watch that more closely. We can integrate with your intercom or with your Jira or with your GitHub to start to pick up these pieces. And, so you come in tomorrow after you launch and we can tell you, hey, we detected this launch based on the ticket that we saw. You're trying to affect these metrics. Good news, conversion is up, this is up, but we noticed this issue in a key pathway further down the funnel. And here are 3 intercom tickets that, kind of validate this is a real user-facing problem. So it's starting to be, how do you do those things before someone asks to do it? Or, maybe to parallel it to CorelDraw, it's like, we made the design and we know we need to do these 4 or 5 assets. I don't know, can it like auto scale it to the different things? Or
That's right.
how do you do the magic things just to make the work that just seems like plodding go away?
I think the way to think is the capabilities, as you said, right? The AI ML models to understand the conversion rate drop-offs was almost like step one of functional. We were all functional
Yeah.
testers or using chatbots of the AI models, right? That's what we
Right.
were. We were trying to understand, hey, where are the edges? What are the things? As generally, evals is getting mature for what are the things. I mean, because we're in the graphics design area in this product, evals are much, much further behind, right? Like it's not yet there. I need a way for me to give a very safe environment in production that I don't generate the wrong image, wrong work.
That could go
The
sideways real
user,
fast.
it can go really, really fast, right? And evals is a great part of it. Until that, step one is super important for you to understand what this environment is, what is the capability. That's what we are collectively doing between the customer and us, right? And then step two is this workflow. Because when the workflow gets enabled, that's the real power of productivity. Even in your scenario that you described, right? You essentially want to automate an action. Okay, hey, the fact you indicated to me that like there's a session replay, there's some conversion rate drop off, but like so what, right? I need to turn it into some actionable insight there.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's move on a little bit, because there's one other thing I wanted to talk to you about that we touched on briefly, you and I, before we jumped on this, but it's a topic I've always found really, really interesting. And we had a guy named Steve Nash from GumGum on here a couple months back now who had a really good story about this. But, CorelDraw is one thing, right? I think it was pretty obvious to all involved, like you said. There was no question of if we're doing it, it's just what we have to do. But you also oversee another product called Parallels, and the update story along that was maybe not as clear cut. And I'm always kind of curious how these conversations go. Like, how did you go and especially approach someone, who was your direct supervisor, your direct manager, or and make the case that, hey, I think maybe you're looking at this wrong, and here's the evidence? Or how do you have that discussion? So maybe give us the background on Parallels, and then let's dive into like how you can navigate these kind of tricky situations.
So let me first tell what is panels for the
Yeah,
users, and
please.
then like I'll give a little bit of background on exactly what we're talking about on this. How do you influence like product direction? So panels is a virtualization product. Think of what was happening like 10, 15 years ago, right? Like virtual desktop, kind of a delivery of mechanism. Applications were centralized. Your users were working out of an office or a building. The users were largely centralized, right? So applications were centralized, managed by IT. Users were centralized. You could deploy a virtual desktop as an IT and have access from this user to this virtual desktop and provide this application access in a secure manner. It's important because of the fact that like if you can lock down this application and the access to the application and what you could do as a privilege within this application, then my data is within my environment and it's not leaking, even if you're a contractor, right? Or if you are an employee who happens to nefariously do things after you leave, or an ex-employee, like there's a lot of such risks that companies are worried about. And even now, well, what has changed, right? I don't have to tell users that's not the case anymore, right? It was already shifting with cloud. It's shifted dramatically in a hockey stick manner, which is users are distributed, right? Users can be anywhere. The applications also happen to be distributed. How do you secure your application delivery as an IT from a distributed environment to a distributed set of users? That is fundamentally what Balance does, right?
Mhm.
So when we started, it was again meant for this kind of centralized user, centralized kind of a thing. So we have a virtual desktop mechanism called remote application server, which allows you to run a server or, of course, a cloud environment and provide
Mhm.
virtual desktops as a service or virtual desktops that IT can provide. And then there is, of course, the edge related. So everybody's laptops are getting much more powerful these days. How do
Yeah.
you virtualize and run an application, right? Let's say, how do you run Windows on a Mac, right? How do you run Linux on a Mac? Super important to know. How do you run even Mac on a Mac? Because if I'm an IT and I'm shipping applications for a Mac, I need to develop and test it. How do you run Mac on a Mac, right?
Mhm.
Or even if I'm rolling out, right? How do you do such kind of variations on my machine and be able to test it out? That's what Panels is doing. So again, like you get the spiel that like, look, the product was there. It was two products. We had an edge product called Parallel Desktop, and we had
Mhm.
this virtual desktop product called Remote Application Server. And we knew where we wanted to go was this thesis that like, hey, the users are distributed, applications are distributed. What we're doing right now seems very discrete products going after just this problem here, just this problem here, right? But actually, what IT is looking at is not that. IT is
Mhm.
transforming. The set of IT folks who are within this environment were also changing, right? Like it is not the same IT that looked like when Citrix got deployed 20 years ago, right? Citrix is the other canonical term in this thing for virtual desktops. So that was not the case. And like when IT is looking at this environment, they want to secure with, hey, how do I secure my Salesforce? In the same vein, I secure some legacy app that got distributed from central way, say a ERP app. And then how do you secure some, like the use case I said, of Windows delivered to a Mac or a Mac on Mac or Linux on Mac, right? Because at the end of the day, IT cares about secure access to some application. That's what their metrics are. So that's what Parallels provided. And like our challenge here was transforming and bringing this kind of like, hey, for the next generation IT, how do we give this platform which can provide this secure app delivery, irrespective of whether they were on edge, server, or cloud, irrespective of whether they were running a SaaS application or a legacy application or a local application on their edge, right? And how do you get the policies, right? Which is like
Mhm.
to be uniform. Doesn't matter where this application is running from, whether it's on the cloud or server or edge, or what type of application, that the policy of securing it remains same. So
Yep.
then the IT's lens is this simple matrix that they can look at and say that like, okay, hey, check, check, check. We're good.
So with that kind of in mind of what Parallels does, it sounds like maybe this is oversimplifying, but kind of two paths. One was maybe a more incremental change, and one was we kind of need to rethink a broader scope of how we're doing this. And those are two fundamentally incompatible ideas,
Yep.
right? So I guess what do those look like, and how do you go about reconciling when it's not like you're not debating which shade of orange here, you are debating are you going north or south almost.
So, like, here's the way to think about it, right? Like, I know, like, we've spoken about like this. It fundamentally stems from getting, like, not just now the vision is understood, like, what we want to go after, which is the product strategy. Now,
Yep.
you want to get, like, the company to rally behind this, right? In some sense, which is like, hey, which direction to go? When I say the company, you're trying to convince, like, of course, your ELT team, but like also you're trying to convince the board on like the
Hmm.
direction and like investments therein and like therein remains the rest of the organizational alignment you need to get, right? So to do that, right, to first not look at this as, hey, this is north and this is south, but to actually be able to bring this as, oh, maybe there's a squiggly line here I need to take in order for me to reach where I want to go with my product
Hmm.
strategy, right? That's kind of the first thing I would say. And we did exactly what you're pointing out. Like you referred to as north and south. Like I completely understand that part. But what it is really like we had this thing incrementally, we had to do certain things, right? Because like at the end of the day, like revenue trumps everything else. So in order to unlock revenue, you need to do something that like you're able to get some alignment, get some capabilities delivered. Yet you're marching towards that product strategy that you've set, which is that
Mhm.
how do you bring this platform capability? So we had to delay what our platform capabilities were by like a quarter or two in order to deliver some of these near-term roadmaps and then be able to continue on, right? We did not completely put it in the back burner, but we had to slow roll some of these aspects so that we could deliver these near-term impact and then be able to do some of these product strategy in an accelerated manner, right? So
Mhm.
in some sense, that's why I said it's a squiggly line than anything else. And we talk a lot about this influencing without authority, right? This
Yeah.
is a classic example of like one of those things where, like, if somebody says no, deconstructing that no, understanding why they're saying a no, and being able to chip away at their blockers in this manner so that you
Mhm.
can still progress towards where the vision is. Because ultimately, if you set a product strategy, hopefully you've done all your homework, you've done like, this is not a question of like, hey, how to do the homework. It's a question of, okay, let's assume you're convinced and it's a right strategy and like you're hyper convinced this is it, that you're ready to put your badge down for
Right.
this, right? That's when we are talking about like what to do, right? I'm not giving background on the homework, right?
Yeah.
So once you've got into that stage, then deconstructing the no is super important because then like you're kind of making these squiggly lines happen and you creatively figure out how to enable those squiggly lines. Hopefully not the north and south, right? If it was completely diametrically opposite, I think like
It can be
I
tough if you're totally north and south there.
correct,
But
correct. If it was
I
a
guess
completely different product, I don't think we would have
yeah,
been successful in all honesty.
that might be when it's time to just rethink generally. But, like, it sounds like here the worry was there was some short-term revenue tied to some short-term kind of, like, roadmap goals to be hit.
Yeah.
But long term, I think it seems like everyone was agreed upon, the where the market was going, so it come down to, all right, how do you but right, you said it's not a conflict. We're not trying to have a huge conflict here. We're not trying to fight about North and South. It's let's deconstruct where does no come from and how do you use that to advocate for the right position that you firmly believe, like you said, with all the evidence and homework behind you. I mean, we did not make this up to be clear, but we have a term we like to use a lot here, disagree and commit, where
Yeah.
sometimes, you're not going to be 100% behind the final answer, but you're still going to get there. But it is also recognized as all of our jobs as leaders to push strongly for what we do believe. I mean, we're all hired for expertise. What we do believe is going to move the company forward in the best way. But once that decision is made, we all are going to rally behind it. And part of that is how do you get the right data for
Right.
people to really rally behind it and to make sure you're right. But like you said, I love the kind of decouple conflict from the discussion, break apart the no and understand where it's coming from so you can kind of start to bring up, well, maybe the answer is, towards your vision. And then, like you said,
Correct.
squiggly line the other way.
And two more things I want to add, right,
Yeah.
to finish off that thing, which is over communicate, right? One of the things I find is that, like, sometimes when I started off as a product manager to today, my communication is one of the big things. If there was a learning that has changed, right? Because over communicating is super important. What I mean by that is not about like, yeah, of course, everybody writes 6 pages, everybody writes PRFAQ. I saw the point that I'm making. I'm making the point that like, how do you communicate often? How do you go by chip away at the stakeholder buy-in, right?
Mhm.
Which is you need to start etching what does it look like to buy into different quarters of the company, right?
Mhm.
Whether it is the different aspects of the ELT team or the board, right? How do you start doing that? So once they say no, doesn't mean like, hey, you retract and change course and like don't do that. But instead, like deconstructing that no, but communicate and keep communicating, right? That's your
Yeah.
first part. The other big lesson is look, I was in Microsoft when I was in my very young age of product management. And I've lived through some of the decisions and I saw some of the leaders there go through this, right? Like it was not a slam dunk for Microsoft to go invest on Xbox. It was not a slam dunk for investment on Azure, right? I heard even from some of the interviews that OpenAI was not a slam dunk investment. All these look like, oh, duh, right? Kind
Right.
of like, hey, yeah, in hindsight,
The
it
wins
all
wins
looks
look
like,
super clear in retrospect, right?
right, in retrospect. But I lived through the Azure kind of a journey in a much more intimate way. And I know the kind of struggles that like internally happened to get to where it was, right? Even the shape of what Azure is today. So it's not a once and done kind of a thing. So there's over communicate is that, which is how do you really use these tools that you created, which is these 6 pages or PRFAQ or other assets that you create, and keep using it to communicate to a larger and larger set of audience that this is what we're going after.
I think to that point, everyone, because, if it's your thing, you've thought about it a lot, it's very easy to underestimate or overestimate rather, just how much this is on everyone else's mind. And
Yeah.
the fact that maybe they hear you every time
The
you say something.
bridge for them to
Yeah,
understand. Yeah.
I heard it put really well, basically, like once you, especially in any kind of CEO leadership role, you gotta take your kind of big concepts, really distill them down to pretty, concise wordings, and then just say them over and over and over again. And as you start to get just like, I want to throw up every time I say these words, it is probably just starting to really sink in. Even, not even just employees, but people outside the company. Like as you get further and further away, people have less and less buy-in to really, really focus on every little detail you say. So it's just keep saying it, keep saying it. Like you said, there's places for the 6-page talks, there's places for the, witty 3-syllable, what's the thing, what's the hook. But you just keep on those things, and it's remarkable how much that will move the huge super tanker over time. Well, Kamal, I would love to talk just endlessly. Honestly, I had a blast in Seattle. I was sad to leave there. I'm having fun today,
I had a
but
blast. I think everyone in that room had a blast.
that was a fun time. That was a good dinner. I do hope if anyone's hearing this, keep an eye out. We are hitting a lot more cities. I think we've got, LA coming up. We're going to be Salt Lake City probably at some point, but we're also going to hit, old favorites, New York, Austin. We'll be back to Seattle. I think we've never done San Francisco. I think we have to do San Francisco soon, but I'm definitely going to come back to Seattle. We'll have to hang out again. But it was a blast, but I can't keep you all day as much as I'd like to. But thank you so much for jumping on. I felt like I learned a lot, both about kind of how to look at products at CorelDraw and how do you continue to innovate on them, even on something that's been successful for just so long. But then also, how do you have these kind of conversations behind the scenes that allow that kind of innovation to happen publicly? So thank you so much for jumping on. This is a blast. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me. And like, it was definitely a fun conversation.
Yeah,
Thank
definitely. And
you.
if people want to reach out, I assume LinkedIn is a good channel for you.
Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, well, check them out on LinkedIn. Lots of smart stuff there. But yeah, thanks so much, Kamal. It was great to have you. Talk soon.
Thank you.